All right, so today let's talk about socialism. 2 cents about socialism. So, socialism is very difficult compared to communism and capitalism to talk about, because if you look it up, for example, on Wikipedia, you'll see that there are like 1,000 different forms of socialism. And I don't want to get bogged down in, a discussion of the 1,000 different forms. And if you actually try to talk to a socialist, as I have tried, you won't be able to pin them down on exactly what they think the solution to all of these problems should be, except that they basically want governments or unions or communities or somebody to take over so that the capitalists don't continue exploiting people, again, which is really a communist theory. So I want to start and try to illustrate the difference basically between socialism and capitalism using an example that I think makes sense, especially in the current environment. So let's talk about healthcare. Socialists, progressives, liberals will tell you that healthcare is a right, so everybody should get it and everybody should have access to it. It's a necessity, and so on. So rather than get into a lengthy discussion of the theory behind the idea that it's a right, let's just talk about a doctor. Let's say, I'm going to oversimplify here, but a doctor has developed a procedure that doctor only knows how to do that, can save some people from something terrible. I don't want to get bogged down on those details either. But obviously that doctor can only do so many procedures. Let's say maybe the doctor can do 2 of these procedures a week. So there's a limited supply available of that procedure, and it's life-saving. So it's highly valuable, and it's not covered by insurance. So, normal everyday people aren't going to be able to just walk in and get it. So he's charging a price for that, which the market bears, and because, back to the supply and demand curve, because the supply is low and the demand is high, the price is very high. So, in a capitalist, let's just take the capitalist path here. If we just let capitalism work, what is going to happen? So initially, and this is what's bad, and I'm not saying it's not bad, it is bad. Initially, only very rich people can afford this life-saving procedure. Poor people, middle-class people who have the problem are not going to be able to help gain the benefit of the procedure. And that is a bad thing for them. And, it seems unfair, let's just put it that way. So if we let capitalism run its course, what's going to happen? Let's just assume that it never gets covered by insurance, just for the sake of argument. Over time, other doctors and medical students are going to see what this doctor is doing and how much money this doctor is raking in by doing this procedure. And those students and doctors are going to say, well, I want to get into that business because that's really lucrative business. So a number of other doctors and doctors in training are going to pick up the skills, if they can, in order to do that same procedure. So over time, let's say the next doctor who tries to take it up, what's that doctor going to do? Well, the doctor's going to, first of all, the doctor doesn't have the reputation of the original doctor, so the new doctor is not going to be able to charge as much as the one who's been doing it all along. He's going to have to offer it at a lower price. And so that doctor is going to offer a lower price, and a few people who couldn't afford the procedure when the other doctor was doing it will be able to afford it now. So more people will get the procedure, and the price will start to come down. Another doctor comes in, another doctor comes in. Over time, and eventually it gets to the point where the market is saturated enough that even the original doctor won't be able to charge as much as he or she was originally charging. So that's how, over time, it would become available to more and more people and affordable to more and more people over time. So in other words, the mechanism of capitalism will work to address the perceived unfairness of the original set of transactions, and the price will come down over time, and more people will be able to afford it, more people will have access to it, until it's saturated and it's either nobody's willing to do it for any lower price or what have you. So let's go back to the beginning of that story and say, what if we take the socialist approach, which, again, maybe to oversimplify a little bit, but the basic approach is to say, look, it's unfair that not everyone can afford this procedure. Therefore, we have to do something to make sure that it's not fair that the very rich should get this benefit and the other people should not. Therefore, we're not going to allow the market to decide who gets the procedure. We're going to put somebody else in charge of deciding. And we're going to have to pay for the procedure on behalf of the people who get it, because many or most of them obviously won't be able to pay for it. So someone else is going to have to pay. So now we have a situation where everybody who wants to get this procedure, I don't know, they put their name into a hat or something, and somebody draws a name out and says, you get the procedure, and whoever's paying for it ponies up the money and it gets paid for. So the person who wants the procedure doesn't bear the cost, so that person isn't shopping for a better deal. They're just saying, I want the thing. Now, it is still the case, as long as the doctors keep getting paid, that the other doctors and the training doctors will still see this signal, and they will still say, look, that's an opportunity for me to get in and do that same procedure. But when the second doctor comes in, the second doctor gets paid the same amount as the first doctor, and the third doctor gets paid the same amount as the first doctor, and every other doctor that comes in, until somebody decides to make a change, they just keep getting paid the same amount, because that's the price. We've established it. It's set up for somebody else to pay at that price, and that's the end of the story. So what happens then? Well, the demand is basically infinite. There's enough people out there who need this procedure that will never do enough for all of them. Therefore, there's always another person coming up, and as long as somebody is still paying the price that was established, you're going to continue to increase the number of people who are providing it, and you're going to continue to provide it at the old price, at the original high price. Now, whereas the capitalist side of this little analogy makes the assumption that the world is imperfect and that people have to make their own decisions and their own priorities, the socialist analogy at this point is basically there's a tree somewhere where money grows, and we're just pulling money off that tree to pay for this procedure. And we're also assuming that, you know, there's basically an infinite number of doctors. I didn't mention that in the capitalist analogy, so maybe it's worth just going back to that for a moment. Obviously, doctors who are training and learning new procedures are going to do that based on the money they can earn from the new procedure versus the old ones. And so, to some extent, what the new procedure is doing is it's drawing people away from doing other things that they were going to do or were already doing, other procedures and so forth, and pulling them into doing this procedure. So, while you're lowering the price for this procedure, you may, depending on how many doctors you have doing other procedures, you may end up raising the price for other procedures. So there are other effects. If we go back to the socialist analogy, there's a couple of other effects we need to talk about. Maybe the most obvious one is somebody else is paying, but their tolerance for paying may be limited. And so, as the number of doctors who want to get the price we've already set for this goes up and up, and the amount of money that's being paid for these procedures goes up and up, eventually there might be budgetary pressure. There's going to be budgetary pressure to say we can't keep spending this much money. And so then some bureaucrat is going to have to step in and say, okay, we're going to start lowering the amount that we pay for this. We're not doing it based on what the market is telling us, because the market's not telling us anything, because people aren't shopping for a bargain here. It's just the price is the price. But they'll cut it to something, right? So maybe they cut it down a bit, and then we'll see what happens, you know. At some point, you're going to reach a place where the people doing the procedure will be less willing to do it, and the people who want the procedure will therefore begin to find it hard to get the procedure done. And we don't always know where that line is, because the market isn't operating, so we don't know what the ideal price is. That's one problem. And the other problem is we may be causing shortages of other procedures, which is going to be driving up their costs. Or if they're all based on a fixed price, then again, people will simply be unable to get the procedures to the degree that they want to. So inevitably, we end up with a situation, because money doesn't grow on trees, where bureaucrats are trying to make decisions about how many of this procedure and how many of that procedure and what the price should be, and they're doing it without enough information to be able to do it in an educated fashion. They don't know what the ideal price is for any of the things that are being priced through the bureaucratic process of socialism, and therefore they make changes trying to achieve a different result, but they don't do it with enough knowledge to do it correctly. So we end up with a market for healthcare that's distorted because we're trying to make it fair, and in the effort to make it fair, all we really end up doing is redistributing the unfairness. Now, I'd like to also just go back to the whole analogy and be very upfront about the fact that our market for healthcare right now is not a free market. It is not a capitalist market, because almost everything that we get in our healthcare system, at least all of the most critical things, are mostly paid for by other people. So the market is already thoroughly distorted, and all we're really debating about at this point is whether it's corporate bureaucrats or government bureaucrats who make the decisions about how we allocate the health care. So that whole thing is kind of a bad situation. So I hope that analogy illustrated just the fact that the intentions of socialism are good, but the information is lacking, and therefore the outcomes are never as desired. But let me know if you think that was not a great analogy, if another one might be better, and we'll keep the conversation going.